originally crushed once, if you would subsequently, if you would crush it, even if you would squeeze it on Shabbat, there would not be a biblical violation. And therefore, the rabbis did not need to make any gezerah, right? We said in general, let's say if you have grapes or you have olives, and juice oozes out on Shabbat from the grapes or the olives, we don't want you to use those grapes, the juice, because you might come to squeeze the olives. You could benefit from that juice, you might squeeze the olive and the grape. But, which is one of the malachot on Shabbat, one of the things you can't do on Shabbat. But when it comes to once it was already squeezed before Shabbat, now if you would subsequently squeeze it again on Shabbat, there wouldn't be a biblical prohibition. So therefore the rabbis were not concerned, and they allowed you to leave that beam on before Shabbat, even though it's coming out, some liquid is coming out on Shabbat, because the beam is quickening the process. But good morning, Simon. Good to see you. So Gemara said that there would not be a biblical violation. And of course, no biblical violation. If you would actually do it on Shabbat, the rabbis did not have to create a rabbinic protection, right? The rabbis generally make a rabbinic fence to protect the Torah, that someone should not violate the Torah. The rabbis did not generally make a rabbinic fence to protect the rabbinic law. You see what I'm saying? So, and the Gemara offered last week, we learned last week, there were two possibilities who the author of the Mishnah was. The Gemara, we had two different rabbis offering two different opinions. We had the opinion of Rabbi Lazar, and we had the opinion of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. So now we're up to Rabbi Lazar. We are on 19, Simon, we're on 19b2. Rabbi Lazar, my time lo omrak Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Why didn't Rabbi Lazar say like Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina? Meaning to say, when he picked Rabbi Lazar went on record and said that the Mishnah, author of our Mishnah is a different Rabbi Lazar, an early Rabbi Lazar, meaning there was a Rabbi Lazar from a later time period and like a Rabbi Lazar from an early time period. And he says that the author of the Mishnah was the Rabbi Lazar from the early time period. And the Gemara wants to know, why didn't he say that the author is Rabbi Yishmael? Remember we found a Mishnah with the garlic, the unripened grapes, and the ears of grain that were not fully ripened, where we said that if they were crushed before Shabbat, the process could continue on Shabbat, which seems to indicate that we're not afraid, because why is it able to continue on Shabbat, right? Because we're not afraid that even if you could go ahead and you would subsequently squeeze it on Shabbat from these unripened grapes and ears of grain, it would not be a biblical prohibition. Because it's not a biblical prohibition, he allowed you to, you're allowed to go ahead and let the juices come out on Shabbat and use those juices, because there is no biblical concern, right? So that is so we have a Mishnah which seems to be a good match. So what was the flaw? Why is it that the rabbi said that he didn't want to use that as the source, right? He rather go with the honeycomb story. The honeycomb, we said, in itself wasn't a perfect match, and you needed to come on to a brighter. What's wrong with this Mishnah? So that is the we were up to in the Gemara. Okay, is that clear? The Gemara wants to know, if you're a rabbi, and you could say a certain answer to the question, which would be sounds like a very clear answer, which there won't be any subsequent question on your answer, or because remember the Gemara said, if you get the story of the honeycomb, the Gemara said was not as comparable to the case of the olive and the grape. So wouldn't it be better to give a case from grapes? The Mishnah talks about grapes. Our Mishnah talks about grapes that were that was crushed before Shabbat, and then subsequently put a board on top of it or a beam on top of it before Shabbat, and the liquid comes out. So we have a similar Mishnah by unripened grapes that, the process was done before Shabbat, it was crushed before Shabbat, and the juices are subsequently coming out, and you say you could use it. So it seems to say that you're not concerned of any biblical concern. Because if there would be a biblical concern about the subsequent squeezing, once it was crushed once, you should not allow you to use the liquid because maybe you're going to come squeezing on Shabbat. So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers, that's Rabbi Loza, my timer lo'omak Rabbi Yosef b'Chanina. Why didn't he say like Rabbi Yosef b'Chanina? Amalach. So he tells you like this. Lav itma, that Mishnah that was brought by Rabbi Yishmael, we have the following statement. Omar Rava b'Chanina Rabbi Yochanan. Rava b'Chanina said to Rabbi Yochanan, b'mechusaran dicha. If the fruits, there are different processes of this crushing of the fruits of the grapes. There's stage 1. There's stage 2. When the grapes already had the first stage of, let's say you press down on the grapes, you're ready with, let's say, the first press on the grapes before Shabbat, now you loosen up the grapes. Now the liquid is ready to come out, right? The grapes have a heaviness to it, it has a thickness to it, and it's not just, the liquid just doesn't come out. When you go in and you puncture, so to speak, when you soften it, when you go ahead and you squeeze it, now it's ready for let's say the liquid to come out. So if you already did stage 1, but you did not do stage 2, everybody agrees that you cannot put the board on before Shabbat. What does that mean? The way I'm understanding is the following. Let's say you have grapes, and you press down on the grape. That first stage will now prepare the grape for the liquid to come out. So once I did the first stage, which I loosened up the grape, but the liquid is still not coming out after step 1. When is the liquid actually coming out? By step 2. The step 2 is when I put the board on the grape right before Shabbat. Now the liquid is coming out on Shabbat. But being that it's the board that's bringing the liquid out, and the liquid, you got the case, Simon, the liquid is not coming out without the board. So then, if I would actually on Shabbat squeeze the grape, then I am doing the biblical violation because it's not coming out without me. It's not coming out by itself without that board, right? We said, good morning, Ronnie. Good to see you, Ronnie.
Good morning, Rabbi. How are you?
We are on 19B.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so on 19B.
I saw the chat. Yeah.
Oh, very good. So we're saying like this: when it comes to the grapes and the olives, what's the biblical violation of? There's a biblical violation of squeezing. You can't squeeze the grapes and olives on Shabbat. Now, our Mishnah states that if you went ahead and you squeezed the grapes before Shabbat, and then you went ahead and you put a board on the grapes before Shabbat, and the board is making the liquid come out faster, you could leave it, you could do that. And even on Shabbat, the liquid that comes out will not be forbidden for you that came out on Shabbat. Now we have we have another Mishnah where Rabbi Yishmael says a similar thing. And the Gemara says that you can't compare the case of Rabbi Yishmael to our Mishnah. Why? Because we said like this: if the grapes and the olives were only stage one, let's say stage one is that what? Let's say you did a certain amount of pressing on the olives and the grapes, but you did not put the board on it, then all the liquid is coming out as a result of the board, of the pressing of the board, stage two. Therefore, if you would go ahead and you would squeeze from those grapes and olives on Shabbat, since no liquid is coming out without the board, you would be in Torah violation. So therefore, when the Mishnah states, Rabbi Yishmael says, you could have that situation. You could have enjoy the liquid that's coming out from the grapes and the olives if it was crushed before Shabbat. It's not talking about the case that only stage one of the only thing that what happened before Shabbat was you press down on it, and then you have the board doing the rest of it. Because if you only had stage one of the pressing followed by the board, that liquid would be forbidden for you to use on Shabbat. Because if let's say Shabbat is 5:45 at night, and at 5:30 you did the first stage of pressing, and then you put the board on it, all the juice is coming out as a result of the board. It's not coming out by itself, and therefore it would be a problem for you to use. So where is the argument? Kipligi. What is the argument? B'mechusar meshchika. That means we're at the third stage. There's three stages. There is stage one where you press the grapes and you put some pressure on the grapes, let's say to loosen up the liquid ready to come out. Then there is a stage two where you actually, let's say, press the grapes. And then there is stage three where then you put, let's say, the board on it, or it's stage three. So once stage one and stage two has been accomplished, so now that's where the question is. If I would subsequently do stage three on Shabbat, would stage three on Shabbat be a biblical violation once stage one and stage two has been done? So that's what the Gemara says. Honey, these olives and grapes, nami kimechusarin dicha damu. And in our case, the olives and the grapes that were crushed before you put on the board looks like it's similar to the case that only stage one was done. Stage one of, you loosened up the olives and the grapes. You only squeezed it once, let's say, and then you put the board on it. So therefore, that the Mishnah says even in such a case, you still are allowed to use the olives and the grapes, the juice that comes out after putting the board on before Shabbat. So even though it was not stage one and stage two of the pressing, with only stage one followed by the board, yet the Mishnah states it's good. So you can't use Rabbi Yishmael as a source for our Mishnah, because Rabbi Yishmael's leniency of using the liquid that came out from the olives and the grapes was only if stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 happened before Shabbat. But if you just did stage 1 and then you put the board on before Shabbat, he doesn't allow that. And that's the case of our Mishnah. So therefore, you can't use Rabbi Yishmael as a source for our Mishnah. It's a little complicated, everybody. Let's make it clear. The Gemara now says there are 3 stages to the process of getting out the liquid. If you did stage 1, if you did the first initial crushing without stage 2 of crushing, Rabbi Yishmael does not allow you to use the liquid if subsequently you put the board after stage 1 of crushing, you put the board on it, he doesn't allow you to use the liquid. So therefore you can't use this Rabbi Yishmael as a source for our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah seems to be indicating even after stage 1, if you put the board on, you're good to use the liquid. Rabbi Yishmael's case was after you already did stage 1 and stage 2, the first 2 steps of crushing, and then you put the board on, then he allows you to go in and use that liquid that comes out on Shabbat. Is it clear what I'm saying over here, everybody? So that is what the Gemara wants to say. So now, if you look at the art scroll, let's see if they, if you look at art scroll 16, 17, presume that's going to be what they're going to say. So now let's look at least one way to understand the Gemara. So now the Gemara says, let's continue in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Hura. Now the question, what is the law? Hura Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina said, like Rabbi Yishmael, in practice, that he allowed for you to use the liquid that came out from the olives and the grapes. He allowed you to use that liquid. I mean, Rabbi Yishmael was the one who said, right? Rabbi Yishmael says you could use the liquid that came out from those grapes and olives that you had crushed before Shabbat, and put the board so the Gemara says he agreed like Rabbi Yishmael. Now the Gemara is going to go into other laws regarding oil. Shema, because we're learning about oil, so the Gemara is going to go into other, regarding using the oil that came out oozed out on Shabbat. Now we're going to learn other related about oil. Just want to see. Okay. So let's see what the Gemara says. If you have shemen shel badadin, if you have oil that's left in the corner of the olive press, when it's under, it's under that you have, and that oil you give to the workers as payment. This is what they would do. They would give the workers the oil that was left over as payment. So you have, if you look at what is the exact case, the oil that remains in the corners of the press under the weights that are on this oil, like I said, is given to the workers. So now the question is this oil which is designated for payment for the workers? So is this oil have a status of muksa? Certain things, money is muksa, right? So what's the status with this oil that's being used as payment for the workers? So Rav Osar. Rav says that you can't move this oil on Shabbat, and Shmuel Shari. And Shmuel says you're allowed to go ahead and use this oil. You're allowed to move it. Now, if you have items items that are that are not that are not standing to be used in a in the normal on Shabbat. There's certain items that are standing to be used. You have food you generally eat. You have dishes. You have utensils. You have forks. You have knives. This is the normal thing that you use on Shabbat, right? You go ahead and you use your table on Shabbat. These are normal types of things that you use on Shabbat. Your clothing. So those items aren't muksa. They are used for regular normal use on Shabbat. But then there are things that you are, you know, you're not thinking about using these. These are not items that it's Shabbat. I'm not using my money on Shabbat. I'm not using my screwdriver on Shabbat. These are items that are cell phone on Shabbat. I'm not using my computer on Shabbat. These are items that it's Shabbat. It's not the normal type of thing to use because it's Shabbat. I don't do business. I don't turn on, turn on buttons. I don't, so therefore those items become a muktzah. They are not, my mind is, it's separated from my mind, these items, and I can't move these items on Shabbat. Now, everybody agrees that there is a rabbinic law called muktzeh. Everybody agrees that there are certain things that you can't handle on Shabbat. The only question is, what are those things, the morning, that we can't handle on Shabbat? What items fall under the category of muktzeh, and what items do we say we're not going to count as muktzeh? So that is how broad is the category of muktzeh. So that is the question. Does muktzeh encompass this liquid that's really not something that's used, you're not using it, it's used for, you pay your workers with it. Now, could you handle it on Shabbat? So, shemen Shabbat dadin, or machsalot Shabbat dadin. Machsalot are, let's say, you have covers that you cover, you have mats that you cover the olives, right? So with those mats, also are they muktzeh? It's not my normal use. I don't usually use big mats on Shabbat. That's not my normal type of item that I handle. So is the mat that's used to cover the olives and the grapes in the olive press, is these mats, are they considered muktzeh, or these mats are not considered muktzeh? Can I move the mat on Shabbat? So again, the oil, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is muktzeh. But since your mindset is to give the oil for payment, leave it there for payment for the workers, so it's similar to items that are standing to be sold, right? If I have dates, if I'm a merchant and I sell dates, and I have my dates that are standing for sale, right? Not for consumption, so that's muktzeh. So the oil that's being used, that's designated to be as payment, is similar to the dates that I'm plan on using for my to sell. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the mats of the olive press, because they used for the olive press, they're not the mats that I use in my house for my table, for my eating. That's the normal use of items. But here these mats are designated for the use in an olive press. So therefore, maybe it is considered not my focus, not the handle on Shabbat, and therefore maybe it will be muktzeh. So that is the declare everybody. These it's an items that are not generally used regularly on Shabbat in normal use. So would these items fall under the category of muktzeh? So Rav Osar, Rav says that it is forbidden for you to handle it. Shmuel Shari, Shmuel says it's permitted, and it seems like that's for the Rambam. The Rambam in Halacha seems to go with Shmuel, that it's permitted to move these items. Hani, now the Gemara has another case. Hani karake de zuzeh. You have a pair of mats that you cover the merchandise that's in the ship. You got some merchandise in the ship, and these mats, what do you use with these mats? I cover merchandise in the ship. Now I want to use these mats for something else. Are these mats, or I want to move the mats, are these mats muktzeh because they're used to cover merchandise? So that's a type of item, Moni Solomon. So it's a type of item. Merchandise is not something that I'm focused on Shabbat. Shabbat, I don't do business on Shabbat. So therefore, the merchandise should be the same way. So therefore, would you say that these mats that if I want to move the mats that are used to cover merchandise, can I move it or not? So similarly, we have a similar machloket. Rav Osar, Rav said it's forbidden. Shmuel Sharei. Shmuel says it is permitted. Okay, so here we have a letter on the Rav Osar. Here we have that the Rambam is going with the opinion that this case would be it's made from merchandise, right? Maybe that's why it will be more strict. It's more it's something that's your mind is separated from these type of things. Also, it's designated for business purposes to cover merchandise. These mats, and therefore, these mats are you're not allowed to move on Shabbat. So that is the machlokas. Omer Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman has another third case number 3, that there's going to be a dispute between Rav and Shmuel. Is lechalava. You have a goat, and the goat you plan on using the goat for its milk, right? Now you have a goat, you might want to use the goat you want to slaughter the animal, right? Sometimes, let's say it's Yom Tov, you're coming off of Yom Tov. What do you do on Yom Tov? Well, you're allowed to technically slaughter an animal on Yom Tov. Technically, you're allowed to slaughter it because it's part of the food preparation that you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. But just like on Shabbat, there's something called muktzeh on Shabbat. There's something called muktzeh on what? On Yom Tov. So if you have a goat that you plan on milking, and Rachel, so if you plan on milking it, you're not thinking about on Yom Tov, you're not thinking about using it. You're not if you have a sheep that you plan on shearing the sheep, shearing not SHARIN, SHEAR, you're cutting the wool. So that's the type of thing that you're not doing on Yom Tov. Or if you have a chicken that you're not planning on slaughtering because you wanted the eggs, you're looking for the egg, Simon. You want to get a lot of eggs. So that chicken, you're not planning, it's not on your mind to use that chicken. Vitore dirid yadya. If you have, good morning, Asaf. If you have oxes And now you could have an ox that you're looking for some good meat. You're planning on slaughtering it on Yom Tov, so that's not muktzeh. You have an ox that you plan on keeping alive and plowing with that ox. You want to use it for plowing. You want it to be a work animal for you. Or tamrei diska. Or if you have dates that you set aside for sale, it's I sell dates, and I want to know it's Yom Tov. Can I move these items, or can't I not move the items? Do we say that since I am, it's not the normal use on Yom Tov for if it's planning if I'm planning on cutting its wool, so and I'm not doing that on Yom Tov. You can't cut the wool on Yom Tov. You can't shear it on Yom Tov. So maybe it's not it's the type of use. It's not for permitted use on Yom Tov. I'm not. So it's like maybe I can't handle that item on Yom Tov. It's not the normal item that's standing for normal use, right? And so similarly, if I am the dates were designated to be sold, I'm not planning, Money Jack, I'm not planning on using it. It's standing to be sold. Therefore, my mind is off of it. And now I should not be able, can I handle it? Can I move it on the Yom Tov? Do we say that it's in the category of an item that falls into the category of mukseh or not? So again, we have the dispute between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says that it is forbidden to move these items on the Shabbat, and Shmuel says it is mutar. Shmuel says they don't fall into the category of, I'm sorry, we're talking about Yom Tov. They don't fall into the category of mukseh. Now, these items, remember, these items, we're talking about dates, we're talking about a chicken, talking about an ox. These items have use. They are, you can slaughter these items, meaning in general, these items have a permitted allowance on Yom Tov. It's not like Shabbat, where you can't slaughter this animal. You can't handle these animals on Shabbat. There's no use for these animals on Shabbat. But or but or but Yom Tov, you have the ability to slaughter these animals on Yom Tov. Therefore, we're not going to, even though even though when the Yom Tov came in, you were not planning. It was an animal that was standing for shearing. It's Morning Stanley. It was Stanley for shearing its wool, or it was an animal that you were planning on just leaving the chicken to lay eggs. But the fact that it does have opportunity, you have the ability to slaughter it. So it's not considered so much separated from you enough to say that you can't move it on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, because you do have a certain amount of permitted type of activity that you would use, that you might come to use have use for it on the Yom Tov. However, so even though Shmuel says it is permitted to go ahead and move these items, but nevertheless, the fruits that are designated for sale that you plan on using as merchandise, or the animals, see so let's look at the Rashi. Okay, so again, so Shmuel says in this case it is permitted to move these items. Now, the Gemara now is going to is explain what is the argument between Rav and Shmuel. What is the argument dependent on? So the Gemara says that their argument, you see, Rav and Shmuel are later rabbis in the Gemara. They're called Amoraim. They're in the later generation. There's the later generation, Amoraim, then there's the Tanaim, the early generation. The Gemara says they are arguing in the argument of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. There's a famous argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon regarding Mukseh, how broad, how far does it extend? Shmuel was more of the lenient opinion, and he said it's very limited, the items that are Mukseh on Shabbat, and Rabbi Yehuda is the more stricter opinion. So Rav and Shmuel, each one is taking one of those early rabbis' opinions. So Rav, who says Asar, he's taking the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that was more strict by Mukseh. And Shmuel, that was said it's permitted, was taking the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that was more lenient by certain cases of Mukseh. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Welcome everybody back. Good to see everybody live and on the screen. All the
Thank you,
best.
Rabbi. Have a great day.
Great day. You too.